podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
Les bon temps brûlé. The city of New Orleans has just opened up shop on the world's oldest profession.
We're all a little depraved and debaucherous. Here is the king of podcasts.
You heard me right. New Orleans, the city of New Orleans has approved prostitution in some way, shape, or form in the Big Easy. We're going to go ahead and talk about it real quick. Depraved and debaucherous. Welcome to the program. I hope you are all having a wonderful setup for summer. I know here in South Florida where I'm at, it's starting to go ahead and start warming up. So, clothes get a little less necessary, and we start kind of unveiling ourselves into a long, hot summer of, who knows, real depravity and debauchery, I would imagine, right? But anyways, here it is. So the story coming out of the New Orleans City Council. Last week, they approved an ordinance that will protect sex workers from arrest and prosecution for prostitution when they have reported crimes committed against them while working. So the 6 members present at the council voted in favor of the proposed ordinance. There was one representative that was not present, but was voting to recommend passage during a council meeting hearing previously. So Mayor Latoya Cantrell will now be set to signing this into law. So this ordinance codifies into city law an existing New Orleans Police Department policy discouraging officers from arresting sex workers for prostitution if they are victims or witnesses to a crime, with the hope that they would cooperate with investigations without fear of arrest. And so the ordinance was drafted with the input of the NOPD and the Orleans Parish Defense Attorney's Office. Now, one of the groups that led the advocacy towards this bill, this ordinance, is the Trans Income Project, a community support group for trans people in Louisiana. And the group's executive director, Natalie Rote, said the change would benefit trans people, many who report having worked in the sex industry at some point in their lives, according to surveys. So it's a great needed legal cover for trans folk and sex workers, particularly when dealing with the carceral system and the criminal justice system. So along with protecting sex workers who have reported crimes, the provision will also place restrictions on how police can investigate sex workers, regardless of whether they have identified themselves as a crime victim or witness. Now, it's titled Right to Safe Sex, and it's preventing law enforcement from using the possession of condoms as evidence of prostitution. And a survey by Human Rights Watch said that half of interviewed sex workers carry fewer condoms on them than they would prefer in fear of negative interactions with the police, causing public health concerns. So does that mean they're going to start carrying more contraception? I don't know. Any more protection for themselves? I mean, I never really thought about the fact of women, or men or women that get into this field. The sex workers actually think about the fact that they need to go ahead and have condoms for them in the case of. Because if they're going to be using condoms, I mean, how often do you know that they're going to, how many different jobs are they going to go through a night? So that's the other thing I'm kind of considering. Like, those are not cheap. And if you really wanted to go ahead and keep an eye on which women are buying condoms, well, just go to the stores. Just go to the drugstores where they're being bought. Or, whatever, bodegas, corner stores, whatever. Convenience stores. You'll probably be able to find out who's buying it for them, whether it's a pimp or somebody else. Like, if you see somebody that's a consistent condom buyer, probably rest assured it's somebody who's having a lot of sex that might be personally having that. Or more importantly, it could be someone that is maybe into the point of doing something where maybe there's more of a public outcry for them because they're out there making the business of it. They're in the profession of the oldest living profession out there. So now this municipal law only applies to the New Orleans Police Department and not other agencies that operate in the city. So there's also the state police, which is the troop NOLA, that was sent to the city last year by Governor Jeff Landry. That's probably because of the issues that happened on New Year's Eve in New Orleans because of what happened there with terrorism. So state police troopers will still have the ability to arrest sex workers for prostitution under state law, but after which they can be prosecuted under the state attorney general's office. But that's got to be something that's pretty big if the state troopers are going to go ahead in there and start arresting prostitutes. And I don't think that's going to be something in their purview they're going to be worried about too much. Now, it's not clear whether the state police has thought about instituting a similar policy, but state police did not immediately answer questions about how the troops the state troopers will interact with sex workers after the law passes. And that the fact the state police is only enforcing state, not municipal laws. Now, there are other bills that the Trans Income Project wants to go and push on local government. And they want to take this as a piece of model legislation and bring it to other cities in Louisiana and help extend similar levels of protection across the state. The trans community, or this Trans Income Project, concerned about sex workers. It's an interesting dynamic that's there. But then again, you know, I don't know how many of you out there ever go out and look for who's out there working, but, you know, one of the things I could tell you that at least when I've driven around as an Uber driver, or even before then, if I just run around the cities now these days, I don't know if it's partly because of the fact that most of your sex workers are not in the streets anymore, because of the fact that they can go online, they can go to OnlyFans, they can go to some other sites that are accessible easily for people to go ahead and find. You know, and if they don't want to go do that, they can just find their local massage parlor if they want to do that, you know, or a body rub place. So there's places that the guys can go to get something, or to your local strip clubs and, you know, paying up in the champagne room. But what we're learning more and more now is the fact that this is something that's interesting in terms of a bigger city. So we know in New York, we've heard things going on. It's really the bigger cities where there's so much foot traffic out there and so much traffic out there in general that there's a warranting of trying to go out there and work. Like where I'm at, it's not as big a city, but I can tell you that there's not that much prostitution as there was 20 years ago. Part of it is because the sheriff's office, mostly for the sheriff's office, except for the exceptions of some in the city police that will allow certain workers out there, there's not that many out there in the first place. Because the one thing that we're dealing with over here, and where I'm at in Palm Beach County, is homeless. So because of the dynamic of the amount of men that are homeless here, as opposed to women, that constant harassment, constant issues for the women out there trying to go and do sex work, they can't really deal with the homeless out there and the kind of barrage of undesirables being out there. Not necessarily people that are like down on their luck, but there's some people that just gotten very drug-addled and they're just not in good shape. And when they go out there, it's like, well, forget about it. Like, the benefit for some of the women out there, or the men, I would say, that would look to be found for sex work, you just go to find a number and just go call and go that route, because it's got to be online. And, you know, it's different now that we don't have Backpage anymore, which used to be the real hub for that kind of thing, or Craigslist, but it's all changed. But in the bigger cities, it still is an issue. And we're learning more that more transgenders are getting more caught up in prostitution in the first place. I'm not making it as a study that is out there, but if this Trans Income Project is coming in about this, they must be saying something that must be in particular about what's going on here and why they're deciding to go and do what they're doing. Now, there is an op-ed I'm taking from Newell Normand. I don't know where he's with, but it's just on Odyssey.com, the Odyssey radio networks. And he says that a safer city is always preferable to an unsafe city. Lower crime rates are always better than high crime rates. But living in a society means that every decision comes with a trade-off, an opportunity cost. So you can't let good intentions keep you from evaluating those trade-offs. Now, as for decriminalizing sex work in the Orleans Parish for crime victims, Noel's saying that the proposal is well-intentioned. They're trying to protect sex workers, the overwhelming majority of whom are young women, but there's a but. Now, again, the two elements of the ordinance is protecting sex workers from prosecution and arrest when reporting crimes. So when a prostitute is with a client and they beat and rob her, prostitute can go to the police, report the crime to the New Orleans Police Department, and not be at risk of facing punishment for prostitution. And the ordinance, secondly, bars condom possession from being used as evidence for prostitution charges. So this is a light version of the Nordic model, taking away the criminal status from the seller, placing it all on the buyer, which I'm fine with that. Like, I think that's much more of a fair and sensible thing for the women out here. I mean, they're trying to go make it where you're not pushing so much and penalizing the women that are out here trying to go make a living. That's the part where I can kind of understand that part. It's a choice. So if there are, if it's predominantly young women, there are transgenders that are out there doing the same. And I can tell you there are some out there because I saw women that, could have been considered transgender, or they were, or at least I knew there were men that were out there that were transsexual and they were dressed as women out in the street. That actually was very common before prostitution really got cracked down where I'm at here in Palm Beach County. And even the same for Broward County as well. I can say that too. They say that this provides insufficient protection, still views sex work as criminal work, and leading for the further pressure for full-scale legalization and regulation. If you keep track of countries that legalize prostitution, you always see an expansion of the sex market, yielding higher rates of human trafficking, because human trafficking preys on the vulnerable and the underage and foreigners who are less likely to go to the cops to begin with. Well, that's the part you got to go after, is that you don't want to have it where prostitution is just made so wide open and askance, where young men and women can be brought into this and indoctrinated into it and just kidnapped, brought into this. You want to get rid of that part, because of course that's all behind closed doors. We're talking about the fact that this is sex work that's on the street. You can see it in front, and it's like a don't ask, don't tell. You might see it happening. And I'm sure that for the men and women that are out there trying to prostitute themselves, they're probably looking to go and find some real money out there from men and women that are out there looking to go and get laid, because they're all drunk and all at it from being out there acting like it's Mardi Gras every day on Bourbon Street or the French Quarter itself. So Nordic model is becoming more common in the U.S. Places like Maine, Baltimore, Chicago have already instituted this kind of style. Initial stages, you hear all the talking points that it removes sex work from the bowels of society, provides workers more protection, security, and health care. He says here, I don't want anybody to suffer abuse and feel unable to approach law enforcement when crimes are committed against them. But the important question to ask is, what's the most likely outcome as opposed to the desired outcome? So he goes on to the idea, like, if you did the same thing with sex work, would the same thing be going for cannabis? Other things like that. So you bring in boatloads of tax money, number of ODs and crime rates will plummet, and how many abused sex workers get police protection? So when you take the steps in the direction of legalization, you offer an invitation to those in surrounding areas involved in similar criminal behavior to take advantage of laxer laws. So the Nordic model, he says here, is simply the same one-size-fits-all approach, often tried but doesn't work, he says. But he says, on with a question, do you want the French Quarter real quick to lose? Start relaxing sex worker legislation. Start right there and see if it won't spread to the surrounding neighborhoods. See if it won't encroach on businesses, school zones, or public spaces. See if it won't lead to more advertising or public solicitation. Well, I don't know what you do. Like, do you create a bunny ranch in New Orleans and like say, okay, I mean, I'll put it like this. If you want to go institute sex work, then why not have brothels be allowed? Legal brothels in the French Quarter. Just don't have it on the street. And have it where those places have to have people that are protecting, like the people that are going to be having those brothels, make it in that sense. You could do that. Then you're just going to the Latin American model. So like, love motels and the clubs where you can go upstairs and get something done, on the cheap. You could do that. And I think that would be the direction to go. If you're going to do something about it. I mean, if it's not out in public, and that's the thing, too, with the prostitutes. Where are they going to go with these young men and women when they're going to go and get a client? Where are they going with them on this? Is it going to be in a street corner, an alley? Like, where are they going to go? In a car? You don't want them to be in that environment. That's where, in this case, I think if New Orleans was to do something, you don't necessarily need to do what Las Vegas does. But it should be enclosed. So make it where the brothels are legalized. Make it where there are legal brothels that are allowed, and, they're checked on, inspected, whatever, and, whatever it is. You want to get a tax on them? Go for it. Then you go that route. Because the thing, too, is that when you have people visiting New Orleans, they're having an adult time, okay? They're going to go get drunk. They're going to go get laid. They're going to go out and do things. They're looking for depravity and debauchery by going to New Orleans for the French Quarter experience. Okay, not everybody's there to go ahead and look at the churches and look at the the riverboats and all this stuff. That's all nice and good. But I can tell you, when you go down to Bourbon Street, obviously you see the environment that's out there, especially during Mardi Gras. You think on a religious holiday they would do that on Ash Wednesday, but they do. Nevertheless, people are going there to New Orleans. If they want to go and go somewhere to go have some fun, find somebody to go and fool around with, then make it where there's legal brothels. Set that up and make it something that's more common to go and do. And I think that would work out better. So Noel Norman mentions the other cities that are doing this, but let's go and delve into what other areas could be looking to do the same thing here. So I did a little research on it. So here are some of the other cities and vicinities considering decriminalizing prostitution. So Washington, D.C. right now has highlighted that criminalizing sex work is a matter of health, safety, and survival. Noting that criminalization can lead to various threats for sex workers. And models in other countries like New Zealand and Belgium, where decriminalization has occurred, showed improved conditions for sex workers, including better legal, health, and safety rights, and improved relations with police. So D.C., look at it. We've talked about New York. Bills introduced in New York, and we've talked about this, a couple of years ago. They were talking about moving forward with this. So there's a Senate bill and an Assembly bill in 2022 that aimed to remove criminal penalties for consenting adults involved in sex work. I did this on my When I'm About Podcasting series. The arguments in favor suggest this could lead to better regulation, improved healthcare access, and increased support for those in the industry. Massachusetts also considering legislation that would also decriminalize while maintaining legal consequences for pimps and buyers, focusing on reducing exploitation and ensuring sex workers' safety. In Vermont, they've engaged in discussions about decriminalizing, with proponents arguing it would harm reduction and improve access to support services. You also have the same talk about in Missouri and Hawaii and Rhode Island and Tennessee. So we know that there have been states that have proposed legalization to decriminalize sex work. These broader state-level policy changes have often faced challenges in passing. Again, Nevada is the only U.S. state where the entire state is legal for prostitution, and some counties through licensed brothels. You might as well just do the same thing here. In New Orleans, you make it where there's an area where there are licensed brothels, the same route. It's inevitable. Prostitution is still going to be around anyways. And let's make this clear. We wouldn't have to go this route if we didn't have to go through the issues of the constant thing of where you look at everything right now. When it comes to people in their relationships, the thing is that guys, maybe they're not always necessarily, maybe you always hear the part, oh, guys are happy staying single, and they're not necessarily going into any situationships or any relationships because they don't want to deal with any modern independent women that are just very much describing and making the case that guys don't need to go and worry about them because your love is not enough for them and their money is not enough for them. Again, we know that our relationships right now these days are all based on love, sex, and money. And there's no love from some of these women that want this. They want sex and money. Not even sex. If they can find a guy that they're attracted to, all the normal qualifications, they're rich, they're successful, they are attractive, they're a certain height and a certain girth, that's what they want. And there's only a few of those guys that are around there, only a certain small percentage. But the rest of the guys, we're not going to hear that part of the conversation where, guys will find some place to go ahead and get themselves even tempered, right? Get themselves relaxed, whether it's to their own self-love trials and tribulations, or they go find some place to go to get themselves, managed. Take off the tension. Find a little stress breaker, which is why there are a plethora of massage parlors and body rub salons that are out there. It's not hard to find. I mean, you can go look for them. There's enough message boards out there. There's enough places you can go and find out where people will go and talk about it on a regular basis. Just make that point. Of course, there's the passport bros. Some guys will just go and just go out. And in the same way, they are working, they're getting to interact with women that basically are kind of prostituting themselves to be found and to be brought over to the States and to be cared for. Let's make that clear too. But more importantly, we're looking at the fact that prostitution is going to be a necessity for some guys because we're not able to get into the regular relationships like we'd like to. We're not able to get into situationships like it normally would be without being put with a price tag or some kind of boundary in place that involves money coming out of our wallets or some kind of gifts or something else that a woman vies for the discretionary income because they don't want to spend their own money, nor do they want to spend money on you. They don't want to reverse the subject. They don't want to do that at all. No, never. So the good times rolling in New Orleans. We'll see if this all gets passed. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll report it back here once again. But in the meantime, what is the issue about why guys might resort themselves to prostitution or to find some other place to go ahead and go pay for play if they have to do that wrong? If they're going to go pay for play, they're going to be honest about it. And women, that's the other part. I mean, if you want to go ahead and make that point, there are probably some guys that will be willing to entertain you looking for discretionary spending or someone to support them, for you to be supported by them. But this means you actually have to put out. That means you actually have to put the effort in, at least sexually, to satisfy the men that are willing to support you. So how many women can say they can do that? That they're willing to go and say, okay, if the guy supports me, sex anytime he wants. And I can't say no, and I can't be hesitant, and I have to do what he wants because he's giving me what I want. If we just went to that barrier now, how many women are willing to go and say, yes, I'll do that? Or how many of them are going to stick to their britches and say, no, I still want things because I'm pretty, I'm beautiful, and I deserve it. And you should just do it without complaining. Take care of my bills, take care of my payments, take care of my kids, all this. But imagine if we put that in place. If there was a rule, absolutely. Okay, situationship, you want to make a situationship? Okay. But, it's not like, it's got to be pay for play. Like, you actually have to perform. Put a price tag on it, go. Because if these girls don't want to have that, there are other girls that will. Because that's the thing. There are women that are willing to go to that route, to sell themselves in order to go and make a living however they want to do it. There are women that will do that. Some that come into the country, they realize, well, this is their way of moving ahead. If they don't have papers, whatever it is, or other things. But think about it. In other countries, it's common commonplace, which is why there's a Nordic model, which is why there's a Latin American model, which is why there's an Asian model, whatever there is. This is a commonplace thing. Prostitution, if it was done and closed, legalized, licensed, yeah, then why not do that? The thing is, you don't have to go ahead and legalize and decriminalize the whole thing. It's the same way where cannabis works in the same way. Where cannabis, if you're going to have it, okay, it needs to be within certain stores, dispensaries, medical marijuana treatment centers, doctor prescribe, or you have another way to go and do it. But it's got to be a licensed dispensary that's going to be able to go and do that. So cannabis is already doing that. Prostitution could be the same thing. So if you want to do that, and if states want to have it, some states don't, that's fine. But that's where it should be. So not surprising that New York or Vermont or Washington, D.C. wants to go in and decriminalize. They don't need to decriminalize. Licensed brothels, make them where they're in set designated places, and you know where they are, and just go that route. I mean, if we were going to do it, then you're going to do that. And at least you can, and then what you want to do is you want to control the route where there is any sex trafficking or any child trafficking, things like that. That is unacceptable. But if there are women and men that are volunteering themselves to go and get laid or to get paid to be laid, to lay guys or whatever, to let them do it. Just let it be done because it's probably just a better course of action. And it's also doing a public service for those because society has changed so much that we can't have regular relationships. It's just not that easy to go and find an American woman that just go and settle and out of simply love want to make a relationship work. It's just not, it's not allowed anymore. Society's changed so much. This is where I always talk about the book from Esther Villar and the Manipulated Man. She talked about this, 50-something years ago? She's absolutely right about it. And look where we are today. Women's liberation, in some cases, has amplified and has grown bigger than it ever has before to something that is now unattainable, unmanageable, unreasonable, and delusional for some of the women out there to feel like they're equal. They're never equal, never enough money, never enough anything, and complaining that they're single. Also, another thing I keep reading about where I'll see some events being hosted, singles events. Remember I told you about the friend zone file case of the girl that I had that I reconnected with going to these BBW functions, which were singles functions. And now there are singles functions these days where there are not many men coming out. It's mostly women. And that's just where we are now, because not a lot of tickets being bought by men to go out and deal with these women that are dealing with this. It's just not there. There are good women out there, don't get me wrong. But how often do you know that if some of those good women that you see out there that you would have wanted to hold on to, you don't get them because they're picked up so quickly. Like when the first opportunity to go in arises, if a guy is able to go and find a girl that's just naturally good and she's here and she's American, they're gonna be the ones that will be swept up the quickest. That's just how it is. Now, a couple of stories I want to bring up before we wrap things up. From Wired Magazine, they talk about the biggest dating app faux pas for Gen Z, and it's being cringe. So you talk to a 25-year-old living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His name is Giovanni Wolfram. And his biggest fear when he goes on a dating app is he might come off as cringy. He says, quote, "You can get away with being ugly, but being cringy is just like, that's a character that's imprinted on you." He joined Hinge at age 18, so 7 years he's been on it. He's worked hard to scrub his profile of sincerity, kept his responses to Hinge prompts as sarcastic and ironic as a litmus test. And some people take his snark seriously, but those don't get a response from him. He says, "Intellectually, I'm really all about sincerity and earnestness, being perceived as one of those guys who is too earnest and sincere." He's worried that then we can be brought up that way. So sincerity, earnestness, irony-free declarations of contentment, these are all many things that young adults edit out of their online personas. And what Gen Z considers cringe might strike simply as directness and honesty, but one generation's authenticity is another's red flag. Young adults' tendencies towards lightheartedness and jokes and their online self-presentation may point the way many of them are dealing with their feelings of vulnerability and disillusionment. So they talked to a psychologist from New York, Jordan Meisel, saying that, "I think there's just an awareness that it's far more vulnerable to create a persona that feels accurate to who you are as opposed to you think you're supposed to be who you'd like to be." So they try to go in a couple areas about what guys and gals should be doing to avoid any kind of issues. First is saying be not cringe. So they talked to a 25-year-old New Yorker, a woman named Leela Goodwillie. That's not a real name. And she talks about whether cringiness would repel her from someone's profile. She says, "I'm not proud of that because I feel like when I meet people in person, I kind of like nerdy guys. I kind of like guys who are a little dorky and maybe a little bit cringe." But her taste is distorted. People are getting more picky and getting turned off by the cringe factor. So she points out some famously cliched tired tropes she sees in military profiles, in dating app profiles. Guy holding a fish she caught, the military guy. A guy who posts shirtless selfies at the gym. And she's identified more archetypes she finds cringe. The guy who writes and asks me all about the time I went motorbiking across Vietnam. Or the 2 truths and a lie prompt. And the guy who includes videos of himself playing guitar. It's difficult to escape the fate of being slotted into one of these many cringy categories. Yeah, it's not even the sincerity or earnestness. It's the originality. It's the uniqueness of somebody. Yeah, I can understand that part. It's not cringe. It's just typical. It's predictable. And that's not what anyone wants. So I wouldn't say it was really cringe, but they call it cringe. And they go on to say that self-consciousness can hinder young people's ability to get what they want out of the apps, love, and companionship. And the people that bring serious and earnest energy, frankly, probably have the most long-term success because they're being open and vulnerable and earnest and clear about what they want. But that's the part where we are trying to be open and vulnerable, which is also the antithesis of what women wanted in the first place. They don't want a man who's like got his heart on his sleeve. So it doesn't make any sense either. And then a new fear they're talking about is they don't want to come off as cringe, try hard, or pick me. And these are all the weaponized terms that are really controlling the social landscape. Younger patients often struggle at first to identify that there's precisely this fear that's getting in the way of their happiness. So they're coming in feeling lonely, feeling disconnected, socially anxious, but they're not sure why. And then our conversations, it becomes clear that their fears are playing an integral role in maintaining this distance from other people. Cringe, tryhards, pick-me's. And these are some people that I usually see on TikTok they're going to be called this because they're giving dating advice. And it's like they're trying to help the opposite sex out. Especially women get the pick-me type. Because there are a lot of women that I see on my For You page that are constantly trying to go ahead and give advice and try to be supportive and defend men. And women that get the pick-me distinction, and that's what it all comes down to. But the aversion to vulnerability is related to a larger sense of disillusionment with the world. Quote, it is very vogue to be cynical, to be pessimistic, and to be an end-day stinker. I think taking a protective stance is in line with having a cynical view of the future. Vulnerability in the form of genuineness is the opposite of that. Now, the other thing that goes into the cringe is also the ick. So now, there is a psychology behind the ick, and there's a new study that links sudden dating turnoffs to narcissism and perfectionism. This is published in the Study of Personality and Individual Differences, shedding light on the phenomenon often called the ick. So researchers wanted to know what causes people to experience the ick, becoming a widely recognized concept in pop culture. Awkward gestures, quirky habits. The ick is a sudden feeling of repulsion that leads people to want to end a romantic relationship, sometimes without a clear or logical reason. They talked to 125 single adults recruited through Amazon's Mechanical Turk platform, 74 men, 51 women ranging in age from 24 to 72. And the results say that 64% of participants had experienced the ick at some point. Women were significantly more likely than men to be familiar with the term and to have felt it. And the number of times people reported experiencing the ick varied widely, and must said it happened rarely or occasionally. And the ick also led many participants to stop dating a partner, either immediately, 26%, or later on, 42%. And others, at 32%, continue the relationship despite feeling put off. But most people, and 92%, talk to someone else about their experience, often confiding in friends and family, and only a minority of people share their feelings with the person who caused the ick. Look at that. It's like people don't even know how to go and just be straight up with each other. We can't just talk. So no wonder we're seeing the issue right now where there is the prostitution issue we were just talking about, or the reason why people are unable to go and date. It's like you're not allowed to just be yourself and just kind of talk things out. It's such a problem to go and say anything. Well, the other thing you could also say too is you don't need to be worrying about that. Maybe you just go ahead and just be more direct, more forthcoming, and allow yourself to be depraved and debaucherous.